Okay, real quick, before we get into anything, I need you to look around the room you're in right now. Go ahead, I'll wait. Now, I want you to think about how many of the things you just looked at only exist because somebody, somewhere, completely and utterly failed at something else entirely. Like, not almost failed, not tried their best and got a B minus. I mean, catastrophically, embarrassingly, laughably failed. Because the answer, I promise you, is more than you think. And look, before you feel too good about yourself, just know that most of these inventors were legitimately brilliant people. They were scientists, engineers, chemists. These weren't regular guys just fumbling around in a garage. These were the best in their fields, and they still managed to stumble into some of the greatest discoveries in human history purely by accident. So today, we're going to walk through some of the most important, most used, and honestly most insane things that were invented completely by mistake, including one that literally saved over 200 million lives, one that you probably ate within the last week without thinking about it once, and one that was almost turned into a weapon of war before someone decided it was more useful as a household product. Hold on though. Alright, let's start with something that is almost definitely within 20 feet of you right now. The microwave oven, a machine so fundamental to modern lazy eating that the idea of not having one feels almost offensive. And yet, the microwave exists entirely because a man named Percy Spencer didn't notice his snack melting. Let me paint the picture. The year is 1945. Percy Spencer is an engineer working for a company called Raytheon, which at the time was heavily focused on military technology, specifically radar systems. Percy was genuinely one of the smartest guys in the building, self-taught, no formal education past elementary school, and yet somehow became one of the leading experts in radar technology in the entire country. The guy was legitimately impressive. One day, Percy is standing near a piece of equipment called a magnetron, which is basically a device that generates microwave radiation and was used in radar systems at the time. While standing near it, Percy reached into his pocket, presumably to grab a snack, and discovered that the chocolate bar he had put in there earlier was now a warm, melted, chocolatey disaster inside his pocket. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Most people in that situation would probably be mildly annoyed, throw the chocolate away, and move on with their day. Percy Spencer was not most people. Percy Spencer thought, hold on, what just happened? And instead of getting frustrated, he got curious. He started experimenting. He put popcorn kernels near the magnetron. They popped. He put an egg near it. And I want you to picture this. Percy Spencer and a colleague leaning over this military radar equipment, watching an egg explode directly in one of their faces, which happened. But Percy was undeterred. He kept going, kept testing, and eventually filed a patent for a device he called the Radarange. The first commercial microwave oven was released in 1947, stood nearly 6 feet tall, weighed over 700 pounds, and cost the equivalent of about $50,000 in today's money. So, yeah, not exactly the countertop model you've got at home. But the concept was there. It took about 20 years of refinement before the microwave became the affordable, compact appliance we know today. But the entire thing traces back to one man, one magnetron, and one melted candy bar in a pocket. And I just think it's funny that one of the most used appliances in modern history essentially began with a guy discovering his chocolate was ruined. Truly, the most relatable origin story of all time. Okay, moving on. And I'll be honest, this next one is a story about failure that sat on a shelf for 6 years before anyone figured out what to do with it. And then it became one of the best-selling office products in the history of the world. The year is 1968. A chemist named Spencer Silver is working at 3M, which you probably know as the company that makes basically every piece of adhesive tape ever. Spencer's job is to develop new adhesives, stronger adhesives, better adhesives, industrial-grade stuff that could hold things together more powerfully than what already existed. That was the goal, make a stronger glue. Simple enough? Spencer did not make a stronger glue. What Spencer accidentally made instead was an adhesive that was, by all conventional measures, a bad glue. It was weak. It didn't bond permanently. Things stuck to it and could just as easily be peeled off without leaving any residue. For someone whose entire job was to make strong adhesives, This was a pretty spectacular failure, and 3M knew it. They couldn't figure out what to do with it. Spencer kept trying to tell people inside the company that this thing had potential, but nobody could see it. And so this weird, weak, useless adhesive just sat there for 6 years. Then in 1974, a 3M employee named Art Fry goes to choir practice, and during the service, the little bookmark he had placed in his hymn book keeps falling out. And for whatever reason, this minor inconvenience triggers something in Art's brain. He remembered Spencer's failed adhesive from a seminar years earlier and thought, what if I put that stuff on a piece of paper? It would stick, but it wouldn't stick permanently. It would be a bookmark you could reuse and move. Art went into work the next day, got some of Spencer's adhesive, made his bookmark, and it worked perfectly. They refined the product, spent years trying to convince 3M's marketing department that people would actually pay for little sticky notes, which understandably was a hard sell at the time. But eventually they launched it, and Post-it notes became one of the best-selling products in 3M's entire history. So that's 2 stories in one. A scientist who failed at his actual job and created something accidentally, and then a second guy who needed a better bookmark and accidentally unlocked a billion-dollar product. I love this one specifically because it required 2 separate people to have 2 separate random moments to make it work. Remove either of them, and it probably never happens. The right accident at the right time with the right person nearby. That's genuinely most of how history works, and it's kinda terrifying. All right, we're gonna take a turn here. Because the first 2 examples were funny and interesting, this next one is funny and interesting, and also responsible for saving somewhere between 200 million and 300 million human lives, depending on which estimate you use. So, no big deal. The year is 1928. Alexander Fleming is a Scottish bacteriologist working in London. He's been studying bacteria for years, specifically trying to find substances that could kill harmful bacteria in the body. Noble goal. Important work. Fleming knew what he was doing, and he was good at it. But Fleming also had a reputation for being, let's say, not the most tidy scientist. His lab was famously messy. Petri dishes stacked everywhere, experiments left out, stuff just sitting around. His colleagues apparently had thoughts about this. But Fleming kinda just did his thing. So in the summer of 1928, Fleming goes on vacation and leaves a bunch of Petri dishes stacked in the corner of his lab. In these dishes, he's growing Staphylococcus bacteria, which is a particularly nasty bacteria responsible for a range of serious infections. He leaves them out, unsupervised, in a messy lab and goes on holiday. When he comes back, he starts going through the dishes. Most of them are what you'd expect, bacteria growing fine. But one dish catches his attention. One dish has developed a mold on it, a contamination. Something got in there while he was gone. And normally, in a well-maintained lab, this would just be a ruined experiment that you throw away. Except Fleming noticed something about this particular dish. Around the mold, there were no bacteria, like a clear ring of nothing. The bacteria that had been growing in that dish was dead in the area surrounding the mold. Something the mold was producing was killing the bacteria. Fleming didn't throw the dish away. He looked at it more closely. He identified the mold as Penicillium notatum. He wrote a paper about it, and while it took another decade for other scientists to fully isolate and develop penicillin into a usable medicine, the discovery started right there. With a messy scientist who went on vacation and came back to a contaminated Petri dish that any reasonable, tidy person would have just tossed in the bin. Penicillin went on to become the world's first antibiotic. It transformed medicine in a way that is almost impossible to overstate. Infections that were death sentences before penicillin became treatable within days. Soldiers in World War II survived wounds that would have killed every soldier in every previous war. Strep throat went from potentially fatal to annoying. Fleming won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1945, and it all started because he didn't clean his lab before he left for vacation. I genuinely cannot decide if that's inspiring or humbling. Probably both. All right, we're gonna take a turn here. After penicillin, I wanted to give you something a little lighter, something where the stakes are a bit lower and the origin story is just purely, genuinely fun. And I think Velcro delivers on that. The year is 1941. A Swiss engineer named Georges de Mestral is out for a walk in the Alps with his dog. Pretty standard afternoon. Man, dog, mountains. And when they get back from the walk, George notices something that I'm sure every single person watching this has also noticed at some point. His pants and his dog's fur are completely covered in burrs. Most people in this situation pick the burrs off, maybe complain a little bit, and move on. Georges de Mistral was not most people. Georges de Mistral went and got a microscope. He put one of these burrs under the microscope and looked at it closely, and what he found was that the burr was covered in hundreds of tiny little hooks, and these hooks were specifically designed through millions of years of evolution to grab onto loops of fabric or hair and hold on. It was nature's fastener, already engineered, already functional, just sitting there on a burr that had been annoying humans since the beginning of time. George spent the next 8 years trying to recreate this system artificially, which was apparently a lot harder than it sounds. He worked with a weaver in Lyon, France, to figure out the right materials, the right hook shape, the right loop structure, and eventually in 1955, he patented Velcro, named from the French words velours, meaning velvet, and crochet, meaning hook, which is a much more elegant name than that annoying thing that got stuck to my dog. Velcro spent its early years being largely ignored until NASA started using it during the space program in the 1960s. Once Velcro was associated with astronauts, it became cool. Commercially, it took off after that. And today it's on shoes, jackets, medical equipment, military gear, and pretty much anything else where a zip or a button isn't ideal. All because one guy was annoyed by burrs on his pants, and instead of just taking them off and moving on, he went and got a microscope. Georges de Mistral essentially reverse-engineered nature from a dog walk, and I think that's incredible. All right, the stakes are going back up, because this next one is another one of those discoveries that fundamentally altered the course of medicine, and once again, it was completely accidental. The year is 1895. Wilhelm Röntgen is a German physicist working in Würzburg. He's experimenting with cathode ray tubes, which are devices that shoot beams of electrons through a vacuum. Standard physics experiment for the time. Nothing too wild, nothing too out of the ordinary. One evening, Röntgen is working alone in his lab with the lights off, which was necessary for some of the experiments he was running. He had covered his cathode ray tube in black cardboard to block any light it might produce. And while he was working, he noticed something strange on the other side of the room. A fluorescent screen that had been left sitting on a bench was glowing. Not dimly, noticeably glowing. Even though the tube was covered and the room was dark, Röntgen immediately understood that something was passing through the cardboard and reaching that screen. Something he had not accounted for. He started testing. He moved the screen further away. Still glowing. He put objects between the tube and the screen. Most blocked the glow partially, or not at all. But then he put his hand in the way and saw something that genuinely must have been terrifying in the moment. He could see the bones of his hand projected onto the screen. Not as a shadow, not as an outline. The bones of his actual hand, clearly visible, while his hand was still attached to his body, very much alive. Röntgen spent the next several weeks barely sleeping, doing experiment after experiment, trying to understand what he was dealing with. He called them X-rays because X is the mathematical symbol for an unknown. He didn't know what they were. He just knew they were something completely new. He published his findings in December 1895, and within months, doctors all over the world were using X-rays to see inside patients without surgery. The first medical X-ray ever taken was of his wife's hand, and when she saw the image, she reportedly said it looked like her death and found it deeply unsettling, which, fair enough. Seeing a picture of your own bones when photography itself was still a relatively new concept would be a lot to process. Röntgen won the first ever Nobel Prize in Physics in 1901 for this discovery, and X-rays are now so fundamental to medicine that it's basically impossible to imagine hospitals functioning without them. Broken bones, tumors, dental work, chest scans, all of it traces back to one physicist working late in a dark room who noticed a screen glowing when it probably shouldn't have. Okay, 2 Nobel Prizes, hundreds of millions of lives saved. Let's talk about cookies. I want to be clear here that I am not in any way suggesting that chocolate chip cookies are less important than X-rays. In fact, if you polled the average person on any given Thursday afternoon and asked them what they'd rather have access to, I genuinely am not sure X-rays win every time. But that's a different conversation. The year is 1938. Ruth Wakefield runs a tourist lodge in Massachusetts called the Toll House Inn. Ruth is known for her cooking. She bakes consistently for her guests and has a solid rotation of desserts. One day, Ruth is making her cookies and realizes she's out of baker's chocolate. What she does have is a Nestlé semi-sweet chocolate bar. She breaks it into small pieces, stirs it into the batter, and puts it in the oven, expecting, reasonably, that the chocolate will melt into the batter the same way baker's chocolate does. It did not. The pieces stayed mostly intact. They softened slightly, but they held their shape and created these little pockets of chocolate throughout the cookie. Ruth pulled them out of the oven, tried one, and apparently did not throw them in the trash, because they were incredible, and her guests agreed. The recipe spread quickly. It got published in a Boston newspaper. Then a Boston radio show picked it up. Then it went national. Ruth eventually made a deal with Nestlé, allowing them to print her recipe on their chocolate packaging in exchange for a lifetime supply of chocolate, which honestly is either a genius deal or a terrible one, depending on how much she actually ate. Nestlé started pre-scoring their chocolate bars so people could break them more easily for the recipe. Then eventually they just started selling chocolate chips directly, and that is the chocolate chip cookie, one of the most consumed baked goods in American history, invented because a woman grabbed the wrong chocolate from the cabinet one afternoon, which is genuinely incredible to me. The entire thing hinged on her being slightly unprepared on one random day in 1938. If she had baker's chocolate in the cabinet that morning, we might not have chocolate chip cookies. And I genuinely think that's one of the scariest counterfactuals I've discussed in this entire video. All right, last one. And I saved this one for last intentionally because it's probably the wildest origin story on the list, and it's the one that most clearly demonstrates just how chaotic the path from accident to invention really is. The year is 1942. The United States is in the middle of World War II, and a chemist named Harry Coover is working at Eastman Kodak with a very specific mission. He's trying to develop a clear plastic material that could be used to make precision gun sights for weapons. Wartime project. High priority, real stakes. Harry and his team are experimenting with a group of compounds called cyanoacrylates. And during one of these experiments, they create a compound that immediately and aggressively sticks to everything it comes into contact with. Everything. Whatever surface it touches, it bonds to, instantly and seemingly permanently. For the purpose of making clear plastic gun sights, this is a problem. This is the opposite of what they needed. It's messy, it's impractical, and it ruins equipment. Harry noted it, filed it away, and moved on. The project continued. The war continued. Nobody thought about the weird, sticky compound again. Then, in 1951, 9 years later, Harry is now working on a different project. He's trying to develop a heat-resistant coating for jet cockpits, and in doing so, his team stumbles across cyanoacrylates again, completely independently. They apply the compound. The refractometer lenses immediately bond together. But this time, something clicked. 9 years of not thinking about it, and suddenly someone on the team looks at the bonded refractometer and thinks, wait, what if that's the point? Harry started developing the compound as an adhesive product rather than a material to be avoided. In 1958, Eastman 910, the first commercially available superglue, went on sale, and it worked so well, so immediately, so powerfully, that it genuinely changed how people thought about bonding materials together. But here's the part of this story I want to leave you with. During the Vietnam War, military medics actually began using super glue directly on open wounds in the field, the kind of wounds that would bleed out before a soldier could get to a hospital. And it worked. It sealed the wound fast enough to buy time. It was not FDA approved for this use. Medics were just doing it because it worked and it was what they had. And it saved lives. There is now a medical-grade version of cyanoacrylate that is formally approved for wound closure. The stuff was literally invented as a failed attempt to make gun sights, then discovered by accident a second time while working on jet cockpits, then turned into a household adhesive, and then used on the battlefield to save soldiers' lives. All of that from one compound that a chemist accidentally made in 1942 and threw in a drawer because it was ruining his equipment. So, microwaves, Post-it notes, Penicillin, Velcro, X-rays, chocolate chip cookies, super glue, all of them from accidents, from contaminated Petri dishes, melted candy bars, failed glue formulas, annoying walks with dogs, from people who were trying to do something else entirely and accidentally stumbled into something that shaped the world. and I find that genuinely comforting. Not because failure is good necessarily, but because it means that discovery is way less linear than we like to think. We imagine these great inventors sitting in labs with a clear goal, executing perfectly, and emerging with a breakthrough. And sometimes that happens. But sometimes it's just a guy in 1945 reaching into his pocket for a snack and realizing his chocolate is warm. And honestly, the next time you mess something up, just remember, somewhere down the line, that mistake might be exactly what someone needed. Or at minimum, you can at least tell yourself that while you clean it up. If you guys enjoyed this video and want more moments where I make you feel weirdly good about human incompetence, subscribe and hit the bell. Most of you watching right now are not subscribed, which at this point I have to assume is intentional, and I'm choosing not to take it personally. But if you want a new video every week, the subscribe button is right there. And that's a wrap on the very first one. If you want to catch what's coming as this channel grows, stick around and subscribe. As always, hold on though,